Today, unfortunately, we yet again have more allegations to discuss regarding a popular media figure. And this time, that person is James Charles, who has been accused of having inappropriate interactions with his fans, including underage fans as well as other underage people on social media, where he attempted or did have sexual conversations with them, as well as exchanging sexual photos. This has been talked to death by commentary and drama channels, and from my observation, what has largely been happening is people are really covering what is happening in the moment, but they're not slowing down to really analyze what is happening, connecting his statements in the past and actions in the past to things that he is doing and saying in the present, really understanding and analyzing everything that is going on here and really truly digging down into what this means, what this is saying about influencer culture, what his behavior is indicating, and how we should handle this going forward, and just really understanding everything on a really deep level versus just simply talk about what is being said by James or about James on a very superficial plane. And I really want to attempt to do that deep dive, but before I get into all of that nitty-gritty, I first want to back up and talk about who James Charles is, as well as his history, because I recognize that many people in my audience may not know who the heck he is. So, who is James Charles? If you are unfamiliar, he is probably one of the most, if not the most, popular male beauty guru on YouTube. He currently has over 25.5 million subscribers, and he first rose to prominence in around 2016 when a high school yearbook photo of his went viral, and he has pretty much not stopped being controversial since that point. He has made racist statements about Ebola. It was revealed that the high school yearbook photo that he got famous off of was actually faked. He has been accused of everything from stealing merch designs all the way over to transphobia, because he once said that he couldn't be fully gay because he found trans men attractive at some point, therefore implying that trans men are not real men. Most famously, he was embroiled in a scandal in 2019 where veteran YouTuber Tati Westbrook, also his former mentor, released a video about him called Bye Sister. In this video, she talked about how he had promoted a rival company of hair care supplements, as well as tricking straight men into thinking that they are gay and taking advantage of them. Very weird things to put in a video as though they are exactly equal, but that's what Tati did. Now, this initially was very bad for James. Everyone really believed what Tati said initially because she was not known for drama. She was also his former mentor and had spent a lot of time with him, and people thought that she would have really understood and known his behavior on a very true level. Eventually, Shane Dawson and Jeffree Star also got involved, and just when James Charles was in the process of losing literally millions of subscribers at a time, he pulled YouTube's, probably all of social media's, biggest reverse Uno card ever with his follow-up response video called No More Lies. And in this, he dispelled much of what Tati had said, and the tide completely turned to be in his favor. He went on to regain, and not only that, but grow beyond what he had been at when the allegations came out from Tati. Eventually, everyone that had been involved either deleted or retracted their statements or made apology videos or just refused to speak on the subject further. And since that point, he has really gotten to enjoy a sort of safety net because of that, because people had acted originally so rashly on what Tati had said. They've always been very reluctant to sort of make any allegations or believe anything out of hand, because people obviously don't want to repeat past mistakes again. However, that has really allowed him to get away with a lot of things that other content creators would typically be called out for. Things like making victim-blaming statements on Twitter, as well as flagrantly violating COVID guidelines pretty much the entire time we've been in lockdown. But it does seem that once again, the tide of YouTube fortune is changing, as over the last several weeks, there have been a number of allegations which do seem credible, that could even recontextualize what was said in that original scandal with Tati Westbrook. What exactly is going on here? Well, this all began on February 26th of this year, when a 16-year-old boy named Isaiah made a pair of TikToks in which he accused James of grooming him. These were swiftly deleted by TikTok for violating their TOS, something that would strangely happen to a number of the allegations that were made against James over the coming weeks. Rather than ignoring these allegations, as one might expect, James actually responded to them in full on his Twitter in a quite long post. And while he did defend himself, he did not deny that the interaction happened, but rather that it had simply been misconstrued in the allegations. He said that he had seen someone who followed him on Instagram while browsing his Explore page, then added this person on Snapchat. The person replied to him the next morning saying that he loved James and sent him lewd photos as well, allegedly saying that he was 18 at the time, according to James. James did not ask to verify this person's ID or age, although the person later admitted that they were 16, according to him. Quote, "I would never knowingly engage with anyone underage and put my life on the line for a few Snapchats. I will now ask to see the ID or passport of every guy I have a conversation with." The person that is the subject of this response did reply to James, indicating that they had not lied about their age, and in fact that James knew that he was 16 and said that it, quote, "didn't matter." So, what can we make of James's response? In my mind, I see that there are two key issues with this scenario, one of age and one of celebrity. And it seems that James, in his response, really latched onto that age problem. He did say that he did not ask for this person's ID or their passport. However, it would seem that really this allegation, as well as many others that we will talk about in a moment, do tend to follow a particular pattern. And James has said in the past, as well as right now with this allegation, that people have lied to him about their ages, which happens on social media. You know, if you have sort of your one shot to interact with somebody that you love and that you would literally die to interact with, you may be tempted to lie in order to continue the interaction. There is one important thing to note here with many of these allegations as they start to unfold, and that is the fact that many of them plainly had their ages available in their social media bios.
16? At a push 17? 16?
So if James had taken the time to check the people that he was talking to, he would have known their ages regardless of if he had been lied to or not. And it seems that James had a sort of if I don't ask, I can't be blamed approach, where he just sort of thought, well, if I don't know, then I can't really be blamed for doing anything wrong, so I'm not going to ask. And it seems that he may have even purposefully avoided looking up their ages or asking because he didn't want to have that information. So it seems that he did, in fact, put his life on the line for a few Snapchats. contrary to what he said, because as somebody that would be at risk of losing literally millions of dollars in just brand deals for a scandal of this kind, you think he would be a little more astute at checking people's social media bios before getting into a sexual conversation with them. Not to mention the fact that social media is literally James Charles's job, and you think that if he was going to be good at anything, it would be knowing to double check the people that he's speaking with at least, so he knows that he's not being set up or being catfished. And so I really think that what this shows is that he admittedly has a reckless disregard for the people that he is speaking with, as well as his own safety and the safety of the people with which he is communicating. And while asking for ID or proof of age is a good step, I think that really does sort of not address the hidden issue at hand here, which James conspicuously avoids talking about, which is the issue of celebrity. We know, even going from James's own word, which of course would be trying to make him look as innocent and good as possible, that this person opened his conversation with James with, "I love you." And we also know that this person followed James prior to him interacting with this person, so that would indicate that he very strongly knew before anything happened that this person would likely be a fan of his. And it just seems very strange to me that James would open a DM or a Snapchat from somebody that said that they were a fan, that they loved James, and that that was the opportunity to move things even in a further sexual direction. Because I'm a content creator, and I have occasionally gotten messages that are quite intimate from fans and people that say they love me, and I cannot imagine a circumstance under which it would not feel creepy to be like, yes, let us escalate this to something that is even more sexual. That is definitely an appropriate and responsible thing to do with my platform. Because James would have had a massive power imbalance with this person to start with, because they were a fan, because of the influence and the money that James has, just at a minimum. Not to mention the whole phenomenon of parasocial relationships, which other content creators have discussed in very great detail. I'll link some good videos down below if you want to know about that, but suffice to say, this is not an ideal scenario in which to have a sexual interaction, because the likelihood of coercive behavior, even if on accident, is so much greater. And just in general, having a platform is a privilege, and to take advantage of a fan for your own sexual gratification because you know sort of the power you have over them, your ability to influence them, that's what the word influencer is about, and James certainly is that. It's just, it's so disgusting to me that you would think that that would be okay under any situation, regardless of if the person is a minor or not. That power of celebrity, I think, at minimum, no matter if they are underage or not, they could be underage, they could be 18, they could be the same age as James Charles, and that would still be unethical, I think, to pursue a sexual relationship with somebody that you know is a fan. And if you want to know more about why exactly this is problematic, I will put a link to an article from Insider that you can read that goes into the nature of interacting with fans and the power that content creators have, that does specifically focus on James Charles as the subject. Unfortunately, as time went on, it appeared that this was not the only time that James had interacted with a minor or a fan or both with the intention of a sexual interaction. One stating that James continued to flirt, though never getting directly sexual, even though he learned that this person was actually 17. Another stating that he was demanding and pushy, calling him names like daddy and babe while demanding pictures. While all this was going on, James just acted like everything was normal on his social media and largely ignored it, even as the snowball of allegations started to build. Allegedly, on TikTok, he asked a 15-year-old boy to DM him, even as fans in the comments clearly pointed out his age to James after he had started a flirty conversation with this person underneath one of their TikToks. He also was harassing somebody else for nudes, allegedly saying, quote, "Shut up and send stuff, and you'll get money if you take good pics and videos," to another, among many, many others, getting up to over a dozen allegations as I make this video today. And of course, there are always going to be people that doubt these allegations. It is very easy to fake screenshots, and I'm sure people will say these are just clout chasers. These are people that are angry they couldn't have a relationship with James. They're just being vindictive, that it's their fault because they must have all lied to James about their ages, even though some of them were over the age of 18, and that James is completely blameless in all of this. However, do keep in mind, James already admitted that this happened once, and as we'll see in the future, he continues to not deny that these interactions happened, simply the fact that the events did not play out as these people are saying or even showing that they did. And it does seem that these interactions actually follow a fairly disturbing pattern. He would find somebody that he was attracted to on Instagram or TikTok. He would then move them over to Snapchat, and this is important because if you don't know, with Snapchat, the whole gimmick of it is that things get deleted after 24 hours. And it also shows you when somebody takes a screenshot of something that you send. So unless you have very clear sort of planning and foresight into being able to, prove that an interaction happened, it is very difficult to actually collect evidence and prove that something happened on Snapchat. And in any case, once he would move them to Snapchat, he would then be pushy and aggressive in his language. He would use terms like daddy or babe to foster a sense of intimacy and power in their interactions. And then finally, he would guilt people when they wouldn't send sexualized or nude photos, saying how easy it would be or challenging their confidence. And also, it appears that he had a thing for armpit hair, which, quick side note, I am not here to kink shame James. Actually, armpit fetishes are very common, and I have seen some people, especially vanilla people, that have made commentary about this, say that him having a thing for armpits is an indicator that he has a like of pubescent bodies. And honestly, I don't know. With how much I know about how common certain fetishes are, I am reluctant to sort of, pin my tail on that particular donkey. I don't necessarily know how true it is that proves anything about James being into minors. I think the thing that proves that he's into minors isn't a fetish for armpits, it's the fact that he keeps messaging minors. I don't think there needs to be this additional kink shaming element to it, and I'm not a psychologist. I don't know, and it could be something that is linked to him liking pubescent bodies. It could be him just liking armpits, which is really common, and it could be similar to the fact that people with foot fetishes ask for pictures of feet, but the body part that he likes just happens to be armpits, and I don't really want to get into that. I think it's sort of a maybe point that we really don't need to go into too far, and really detracts from, I think, the more important aspects of the conversation. And as I mentioned, throughout all of this, James had really been silent. He had continued to post on social media. However, eventually there was a break, and James did take some time out of his busy schedule of partying during COVID to prepare an official response, which was released on April 1st. And that's what I want to look at next, because it is very interesting what he says in this video. So, first of all, in this video, he is only addressing 2 of the allegations involving underage people. And we know at the time that this video was made on March 31st that he would have been well aware that there were way more than just 2 allegations that he would have been facing. He does, however, admit that he should have looked at their social media profiles, and if he had done so, that would have revealed their true ages. But he did not do this, and he fully accepts fault for this. As the adult, it would have been his responsibility to ensure that he knew who he was talking to. And actually, he prefers to date somebody that is his age or older. More in a bit about how true that statement possibly is. He claims the reason he acted so rashly with the people that he chose to interact with was because and this is a big takeaway for a lot of people from this video, is that he was, quote, desperate. He says he was so desperate that he had the mentality that he could use his For You page or his Explore page as a personal dating app. He explains when he filmed his original No More Lies video that he thought the only issue at hand was the fact that he was interacting with straight boys. He did not internalize any problems that could have been happening as a result of a power imbalance. And in fact, and for me, this is the statement that really stuck out from this whole video. He didn't think that power imbalances counted if you weren't using them on purpose, which is not how power imbalances work. They're this unconscious, uncontrollable aspect of being around somebody that you have a lot of differences with. So you might not purposefully use your money or your fame or your influence on purpose to persuade somebody or coerce somebody. But the fact that difference exists at all, and by its very nature changes your interactions, is what a power imbalance is. And it's very strange to me that he would frame it like, oh, I didn't know that it counted if you didn't use it on purpose, because regardless of how true that is, from the evidence we have, it would appear that he did use his power imbalance on purpose when it came to the people he was choosing to pursue. Using TikTok as his personal dating app is one example of him consciously choosing to exploit his fame, or him being pushy or coercive in his language. And so what I think is more likely here is not that James didn't realize that a power imbalance counts, even if you aren't consciously exploiting it, but that rather he didn't realize he needed to be so careful with using his power because he never expected it to backfire on him. He never expected anyone to be brave enough to speak out against him because of who he is. Now, in this video, I do agree with James on the point that getting famous at a young age did sort of mess with his ability to understand normal dating and being able to date like a normal person, because he got famous when he was still quite young, before he was an adult, and so he really missed out on a lot of the opportunities that most of us have to try and figure out how to be a good person in dating, awkwardly asking people out, or how to hold hands without seeming really weird, or having those general, really like quick but very passionate relationships that end in often very dramatic or even traumatic ways. He never got to learn how to navigate like normal people dating apps, and he also never really had the opportunity to have those messy relationships in private, and instead any of his relationships that he would have had would have been blown up by like 100 times because of the fact that he's a public figure. And I have also heard theories that say that when you get famous when you're young, it's sort of like stunts your emotional growth, and in a lot of ways you can kind of be like held in that time period around when you first got famous. I don't necessarily know if that really applies here, but it is a theory that I think is worth sharing. However, that doesn't excuse, nor does it fully explain James's pattern of behavior, because wasn't he friends with Jeffree Star? Wasn't he friends with Tati Westbrook, who was also his mentor? Didn't he have adults on his PR team and his editors and people just around him in general and his friends and family? Did nobody at any point think they needed to have a conversation with James about dating and navigating boundaries, and that, like, just in general, hey, maybe like trying to interact in DMs with fans in a sexual manner, like, maybe isn't really appropriate and isn't a really good PR move at the minimum. As we will talk about in a minute, Tati did have a sit-down conversation with him where she said basically, hey, I think this is like a bad move for you. I think, you know, going after straight boys essentially is really going to get you hurt. And it really seems that James didn't take away from that anything more than going after straight boys is a bad idea, and didn't really think in any more of a complex manner about his dating behaviors and why they might be problematic. And I'm saying dating behaviors in a very loose way here, because as far as I can see, he wasn't actually pursuing any of these people as anything more than a hookup or a way to get sexual photos to use for his own purposes. And it really just seems that the result of the whole Bi Sister scandal is that he sort of thought he was impervious and could do no wrong, and didn't really take the time to reflect on his behavior in a larger way. However, at the end of the day, James Charles is an adult now. He is 21. He is well into this journey, and at some point he has to start taking responsibility for his behavior and having his adulthood reflect in his actions. And I really think, as other people have said, if this was a one-off incident, or if he just never really got the opportunity to learn about healthy dating behaviors, it would have been really good for him to have like a gay mentor, like an older gay man that could have shown him the ropes on what it's like to date as a gay man and navigating all of that messy stuff, especially if it was somebody that was also famous that could also understand that component of it. But it really seems like James at this point, from the sheer volume of this behavior, is beyond needing just a mentor. He needs everyone around him to call him out on his behavior and name it for what it is. However, going back to the video itself, James does put a cap on everything by saying that he will be more careful in the future and that he will no longer use social media as a personal dating app, and that he will now check for proper ID from everyone that he is speaking with. And of course, only time will tell if he follows through on these promises. However, in my mind, I feel like it is very suspect that he would go from his original defense on Twitter, where he seemed really blind or just sort of ignored a lot of the biggest issues that were at hand, and basically blaming it all on the other person and claiming that he had been lied to suddenly, in a couple weeks, if that, of time, going, I totally understand everything, guys. I've completely got this. I'm so sorry. I'm going to fix everything that's a problem, and it's never going to happen again. I really, really have trouble believing that James has had the time to truly understand the nature of his actions and really come to that conclusion of, I did bad things. I have been a bad person, and this is how I'm going to change. Because that recognition, especially for somebody that is as famous, frankly egotistical as James Charles, having that recognition at minimum does not take days. It takes weeks. It takes months. It could even take over a year. Who knows? Because of how much of a process it can be to really, truly, deeply understand what is happening and his role in that, versus just putting a nice little veneer over everything where he says sorry so his fans can continue to feel okay using and buying his makeup products. So, what can we really make of this video? Again, like I said, only time will tell if James Charles does the work he says he's going to do. But I think to really understand what he is saying here, we need to look at not only what he is saying now in this video, but what he has said and done in the past, and see if we can draw some lines between these things and really evaluate how truthful he is being with all of this. So I'm going to go back in time a little bit. I'm going to do some historical James Charles archaeology and really see if we can evaluate and compare what he said to things that he said in the past. The first thing that comes to mind for me is his claim that he understands that using social media as a personal dating app is the wrong thing to do. Because not that long ago, literally in January of 2020, right after he had gotten on TikTok, he did a TikTok bachelor featuring himself.
Hi, James here. I can't believe I'm making this video right now, but I feel like this can't hurt, and I don't think it'll turn into a scandal either, so I guess here goes nothing. I made one major observation after downloading TikTok a few weeks ago, and that is that this app is pretty much a dating app. Let's be real. Everyone on here is either in a very cute relationship or is painfully single. And unfortunately for me, I fall into that second group of people. Surprise, surprise. In 2020, however, I'm trying to change that. Okay, I'm trying to put myself out there a little bit more, and I want to get wiped up. So I want to play TikTok Bachelor. If those things are of interest of you and you are a male, leave me a comment down below, or I guess duet this video. Oh my god, what have I done?
He literally said, I don't think this is going to be a scandal, and that TikTok is, quote, basically a dating app. And for me, what is really telling about that little TikTok doing this whole Bachelor thing is almost not even really that he did this, although that is telling in its own way, but that his only requirement is that the people interacting with him be men. And that has no bearing on how old these people are. And I find it very strange that if he was going to go to the trouble of specifying just men, why didn't he say 18 plus only, or at least 18, or at least 21? Because TikTok does skew young. His audience, the people that would see this TikTok, are young. So I would think for myself, hey, I know 50% of my audience is 13 to 17. I don't want to flirt with a 13-year-old, so maybe I should say, hey, do not participate if you're below the age of 18. But James, for whatever reason, decided he didn't need to put that disclaimer in there, which I think is really, really telling. Now, one gold mine for looking at how James really thinks about dating and his plans and his goals would be a little something called the impulsive podcast. And this is the weirdest thing, because this is Logan Paul's podcast, which is like, oh, how times have changed and controversies have gone on. Logan Paul, his own podcast, just showing James in 4K. Who would have guessed? But there is one particular episode which James is on where he talks a lot about his dating preferences and what it is that he's looking for. One of the most famous clips from this is that he says that he has the mentality of a 40-year-old. However, he's not attracted to older men and actually prefers men that are somewhere between like high school, 18-year-old, 19 at the very youngest, to somewhere around his age, which completely counters what he said in his own apology video about preferring older men. So which is it, James? Do you prefer older men or do you not? Because your behavior pattern so far is really indicating that, at least allegedly, he has a preference for younger men. Also, he says that he is basically ready to settle down and wants to find a partner that's also into that, but it's hard to find that with the ages of people that he's attracted to. And this is really interesting because it seems to me, as somebody that values having romantic relationships, that I wouldn't do that by sending sexual Snapchats to people that are my fans on social media. I would be doing that by using like the serious dating apps, right? Like they make dating apps for gay men. They make apps for people that are famous to find people to date that are within their own kind of social bracket, you know, so you don't have to interact with just your fans. And not to mention, just from a sheer sort of utility perspective, you're probably not going to be compatible life goal wise with 17-year-olds on TikTok. That's probably not the demographic you're looking for if you are in fact serious about finding somebody to settle down with. So it really doesn't make sense in my brain that that would be the main thing that you were going after. And honestly, to me, saying that he has the mentality of a 40-year-old as a 21-year-old makes this worse, because on one level, that could add an additional level of power imbalance if he's interacting with young fans because of how supposedly super mature he is, or he's so delusional he doesn't accurately understand how mature he really is. And neither one of those have super great implications for him. And the next little bit I'm just going to play for you guys because I think you really need to hear his words exactly as he says them.
Yo, hit 5 with the 10.
Yes, exactly.
And you're a great partner.
I've talked to a lot of different guys that live in different states as well. This is a better example than just a dinner. Like I've talked to guys that live in different states and stuff, and I'm like, hey, like why don't you come visit? And like, well, I can't afford a plane ticket. Yep. And it's like, okay, well, I can. So like, get on the plane. And like, well, I just don't really feel comfortable with that. But like, I love you and I really want to be together. And I'm like, well, we can't be together because you can't afford a plane ticket. You're probably still in either high school or college, like a senior in high school or in college.
Right.
So like, either you accept the flight and realize that like this is what I'm bringing to the relationship so we can spend time together if you actually care about me. Yep. Or we literally never meet because you can't afford it.
That's frustrating.
Right. Yes, that's right. He talks about flying out high school and college age boys to come stay with him in Los Angeles, and apparently not seeing any problem with doing that. Now, this clip has become very famous. A lot of people have been sharing this in their videos. However, they're not really offering the context of the fact that this part of the conversation is sort of about how James sees balance in a relationship and how balance can come in lots of different forms. And for him, he is not a really great person at being able to show that he cares. And so the way that he shows that he cares is with money. And so he doesn't really care if the person that he's talking to has money or is famous or can facilitate things, because he wants to also be able to give that to demonstrate to this person that he cares about them. And that the important thing is that they are bringing equal effort to the relationship. However, all of that sentiment is very nice, but I don't think that's really what's happening when you are pressuring high school aged boys to fly out to visit you in LA. Because to me, the clear implication is not fly out because I want to be in a loving relationship with you, but fly out because I'm horny and I want to be able to have sex with you. Here's a little pro tip. If they have to ask permission or get an excused absence from school to be able to fly to see you, they are probably too young, James. And here's the doozy here that I cannot believe that people are missing in this whole interview, is that he says he would never date a fan. So what does that tell you about James Charles's behavior? Because in his apology, in all the stuff he's been talking about, it's like, oh, I'm so lonely. I just want a relationship. I want somebody to love me. I just want to get wifed up. His actions are all, I want to have a hookup. I want to have sex with people. And I don't care if it's a fan or not. And so, to me, there's this really, like, icky implication that he's not, like, looking at fans even as a dating pool in like a potentially like romantic and loving way, but he sees them as disposable sex material and would never consider dating them. Yikes. And now, rewinding the clock all the way to the very beginning, I'd like to talk about Bye Sister and No More Lies. For context, Tati had accused him of behaving inappropriately around a waiter during a birthday dinner that she had with her family, as well as in general, apparently having a pattern of convincing straight boys that they might be gay in order to take advantage of them. The first relevant statement that he makes about these claims is when he says, quote, I will never use my fame, money, or power to manipulate or get sexual actions from a guy. Isn't that exactly what you're doing if you're using your money to fly out boys to visit you in LA? Isn't that exactly what you're doing when you're publicly looking for sexual favors or potentially to date somebody on your public social media accounts? Like, I don't understand how he could believe that he's not doing this exact thing. He has been famous for quite a long time now. He would have an accurate understanding of exactly the influence that he has. Also, at this point, he says he's a 19-year-old virgin, which is suspect to me. Because in the Impulsive podcast, I didn't mention this, but he says he kind of makes references to like giving and receiving sex and like, wanting to have sex with people. And that's sort of like an undercurrent of a lot of what he talks about on that podcast. So in the 6 months between the time that he made this apology video, this response video more accurately, and when he was on the Impulsive podcast, did he suddenly lose his virginity and gain a ton of sexual experience? Because as far as I can tell, from what he says in the podcast, he references being experienced with sex in multiple different directions, sort of implies he's done it with multiple people, and then he knows what it's all about. And it just, I guess it's possible that could have happened, but it seems very suspect to me. There's a vibe here, and it's suspect, okay? And what is interesting here is in these Tati Westbrook allegations, it really seems like she wasn't as far off from the truth as we later thought that she was. And, for me, she was his mentor. She would have really been witness to a lot of his behavior. However, I think she is still complicit in his behavior. It seems like she was aware, even encouraging of his interactions at the time with the waiter. It also seems like she really was permissive of this happening until he betrayed her by talking about a rival hair care supplement brand. And if that's the thing that motivates you to speak out, I consider that to be not the highest possible bar for ethical and moral standards, shall we say. If Tati had had the integrity to talk about this without muddying the waters with her silly little vitamin problem, we would probably be in a different place than we are today in regards to James Charles. Now, the waiter that is the subject of this video is a person named Sam Cook. They allegedly said that they were bi to James. They did talk in the restaurant, however, they could not really interact due to the rules of the high-end restaurant that he worked at, where he met James at the time. So they later interacted on social media, where he said that he was interested in James, and they talked for a period of time. In the message that Sam shared, James does apologize about, quote, last night, perhaps recognizing that his behavior was inappropriate, though he never mentions this in his own videos. They do, however, end up sharing a different version of events when it came to the time that they spent a night together at a hotel room. Sam says that he felt he was very pressured to stay by James, and that, in fact, James had begged him not to leave. James, however, frames it in a lot more of an open way, that he could have left at any time, that they shared a nice evening together and made out and watched a movie. However, it is very clear from everything that's being shown, even on James's side, that Sam was very conflicted about his sexuality. Was he straight? Was he gay? Was he bi? Did he even really know? Which only added more confusion to the situation, with James trying to assure him that he's not straight because the truth always comes out when you're drunk. Last time I checked, alcohol wasn't a truth serum. However, Sam did eventually delete the original video he made where he talked about his side of the story of his interactions with James Charles. He later posted another video where he explained what happened again, which he also deleted, this time saying he was too shy and afraid to turn him down due to his celebrity status, as well as the fact that he had spent $500 on a hotel room for them. Yeah, James not using his money and fame to influence or persuade or coerce anyone? I am increasingly not believing that that's really true. Now, one thing that people are looking at again from James's own No More Lies video are some of the texts that Jeffree Star sent him while all of this was unfolding. He seems to believe that Sam, quote, felt trapped in the hotel room. And Zach, who is the brother of his ex Nate, felt guilted into sending photos to James and bad for not liking James back. Note that James did not provide evidence of the nature of his interactions with Zach, at the time that he made the No More Lies video, but he does say that they only snapped for a short period of time and then stopped when it was clear that there was no chemistry between them. However, James guilting somebody for not sending the sort of photos or messages that he wants to have on Snapchat does fall in line with the current pattern that we know from the allegations that have come out recently. Finally, Jeffrey mentions Grayson of the Dolan twins, saying that James had molested him in his sleep, which James also denied. Of course, after these text messages were sent, everything went down the way that it did. This video came out, and even though Jeffree Star had said that he was going to make a video about all of these things, he ended up not doing that. And everybody, again, like I said earlier, that was really involved in this, that had made allegations or believed the allegations against James, ended up retracting their statements or detaching themselves from the situation or making apologies to James once it was clear that the public view of the situation was in James's favor once again. So unfortunately, we have no way of knowing exactly how true any of these allegations were against James that Jeffrey pointed out in these text messages. But ultimately, he does say that he can be reactive and dramatic and emotional, and that he isn't proud of these qualities about himself, but it is something that he is working on, and every time he learns more and gains more experience and is trying to become a better person. While in this video, he never promises to change anything about his behavior or promises to be a better person, we can see whether he does that in the following years. And unfortunately, it seems like he did anything but that. Instead, he's continued to get angry and pushy and act entitled for things when he interacts with fans or is attempting to initiate a sexual interaction. He uses his fame and money to get what he wants. And I think this goes beyond merely just simply desperate behavior. Because he did this not once, not twice, but again and again and again. And that's not a mistake. That's a pattern. As the saying goes, when somebody shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Now, is it possible that these screenshots are fake? Is it possible these people are all liars and clout chasers and simply trying to use James for fame? Yes, all of that is possible. All of that could potentially be true. That is why all of these things are simply allegations. However, I think the likelihood of that is not as great as it might seem. Because again, James has largely been immune to any kind of public criticism since the Bi Sister scandal. Nothing sticks to him. When things like this have been shared in the past, it has always fallen in James's favor. So going into this, these people would have known that they were unlikely to be believed, that it was more likely that they would be trashed on social media, they would be doxxed, stalked, harassed by James Charles's legion of fans. And in general, in scenarios like this, people don't tend to get famous off of allegations. Like, does anybody know any of Bill Cosby's accusers getting famous after they came out? That's not what happens when allegations come out. It's not a fame race. That's not the people's motivation generally. You know, there always are going to be exceptions there. But I think just simply dismissing all of this as like, oh, well, they must be in it for fame or money, is not really looking at the situation with an empathetic heart. And again, I'm going to keep having to repeat this. James admitted to interacting with at least 2 different underage people. He admitted he did something inappropriate. And as he admitted, it was his responsibility as the adult to verify their ages. And in not doing so, he did not act in his own best self-interest or in the interest of the people that he could be interacting with. And we also have to remember that he is literally an expert at crafting apology videos, and he has a very loyal fan base. that are likely to follow him through absolutely anything. And the saddest part about everything that we've talked about today is that it seems that James still has not learned. Because it's not about these individuals' ages, although that is part of it. It's not just about the fact that these people were fans. It's not just about him exploiting his fame and power and money to his advantage. It is all of those things taken together at the intersections that combine to make this a truly horrible scenario. It's the fact that he's lied and contradicted himself for years to cover up the true nature of his behavior. The fact that he didn't seem to think that there would be any repercussions for any of this, that he never even thought twice about flying out high schoolers to come and see him for hookups, that he never thought he could lose anything by sexting minors because he didn't care enough to ask for their ID. All I can ask is, why? What made you reach this conclusion? Because at the end of all of this, what he says is that he needs to be more careful. Careful like a driver that isn't paying attention and accidentally runs a stop sign, right? Oops, I need to be a more careful driver. I wasn't paying attention. This is like somebody that has a history of acting inappropriately around animals, saying, oh, I need to be more careful around animals. I'll be more cautious next time I'm interacting with an animal. This is not a scenario about carefulness. This is a scenario of James needing to recognize that he has a behavior that he needs to stop. Not be more careful with, but to stop. Personally, in my mind, if he genuinely wants to recover from his behavior patterns, it's not just, oh, I'm not going to use social media as a dating app. He should not be dating or pursuing anyone until he has admitted that he needs and then gotten professional help to address his behavior patterns and issues. Because unfortunately, and I have avoided talking about this for most of the video, it would seem that he specifically has an attraction to minors, which could be harmful for him. It could be harmful for minors, obviously. And unless and until he can talk to somebody about that professionally, why it seems that he is at least aesthetically attracted to that age group, I don't see his behavior really changing in a meaningful way for the long term. And I'm sure by the time I finish editing this video that it will not be up to date. There will be new allegations and revelations, and I will try my best to keep up to date, either in future videos or in like a pinned comment under this video, because of course this is still developing. And as of right now, when I'm filming this, James has not faced basically any repercussions for this. He hasn't really lost that many subscribers, if any at all, maybe like a few 100,000, which is nothing when he has 25 million. His response video, when it first came out and it was going to his fans, sat at about a 98% like to dislike ratio. So it was very, very well received. It wasn't until the larger internet and mainstream media began to pick this up that it started to go down. So clearly his fans are still very, very loyal to him. So as I predicted, there were several updates that happened between when I was filming this video and when it is going to be released. The first thing is that the James code was no longer working on the Morphe website. Following that, a few days later, both Morphe and James released statements saying that they were, quote, going to wind down their relationship together. James's products are still on the Morphe website. In his statement, James also said that he was going to be pursuing legal action against those he perceived to be telling false stories and defaming him. YouTube has also demonetized his channel, although YouTube has never made a public statement about this. And I am glad that these things are happening. However, I do find it very odd that it took them several weeks to do this compared to other content creators. He simply has not faced the repercussions. Snapchat and TikTok are still allowing him to use his accounts, and YouTube has done nothing to censure him. I didn't really mean to talk about David Dobrik in this because this is a totally separate scenario, although there are interesting parallels. But with the David Dobrik scenario, a lot of people only thought that he could give a genuine apology if he had not received the hit that he did in terms of YouTube and ad deals and sponsorships and brand deals and all of that stuff. However, I do want to point out that without repercussions, James is unlikely to learn anything. He appears to not have learned anything after the Bi-Sister scandal because he got away with it, because he got out scot-free. And if he does that again, he will continue the same behavior pattern as always. Because to him, it doesn't matter what the larger internet thinks. Everyone on Twitter could think he's a horrible person. But as long as he is still getting support, emotionally as well as financially, from his fans and brands that pay him, he will probably continue to act the way that he does. Because sometimes for people, especially people that are dealing with very deep-seated issues, sometimes it takes a large amount of external force and pressure and frankly repercussions to recognize that your behavior is wrong and actually hurts other people. So I think until he does get those repercussions, until brands and sponsors and everyone else start acting like what he did is wrong, he will continue to be able to act obliviously to what is happening. Because even if he's not currently online, he'll still be able to make money from his products that are being sold online or in stores. He'll still be able to make money from his referral codes. He'll still be able to make money from his ad revenue that keeps being in place on YouTube. And that's why we need to talk about this. Because there are people that have done far less than James that are now sitting in jail for 10 years and he isn't even getting a discount code removed. So I think that's everything for today. My voice feels like I'm dying right now. This was a very, very long process. And I'm sure, again, that this will not be up to date by the time it comes out, but I will try my best. If necessary, I will do a follow-up video because, right now, again, these are all accusations. I will link below to some very helpful additional YouTube videos that go over things like analyzing his body language or the legal implications of these allegations. And hopefully with time, we will see some further developments and we will have a better understanding of everything that is going on. In the meantime, though, if you do have any comments or questions for me, you can put it down in the comment section below. If for some reason you like this and you want to see more videos where I talk about horrible allegations of abusing your power, you can subscribe to my channel because I make videos twice a week, usually about more lighthearted topics, BDSM, kink, consent, sexuality, relationships, all of that good stuff. So if you want to know how to not act like James, you can subscribe to my channel. If you really enjoyed this, if you want to help me make longer form, more in-depth videos like this one, you can go to my Patreon. That is what makes all of this possible. We are currently working towards 1,000 patrons, and that would just be a really awesome goal. If you don't want to support me on Patreon, totally fine. I will also leave links down below to resources you can donate to for people that have been exploited and abused. So also, hey, use your money for some goodness. I love you all so much. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week. Bye-bye.